Mr. Jaco, from a global perspective, which is unique, you know, Jaco. From a global perspective, we talked about South Africa before, we talked about the World Cup, rugby, and then human trafficking is a totally different topic. What have you seen right now in the United States that you may have seen in the other countries before that are kind of those, we talked a little about the triggering warning signs, especially in Texas. Like, I mean, seriously, in Texas? What are those triggering warning signs that you saw in other countries that you're saying, hey, red alarms?
Yeah, and it's all going to come back down to taking ownership in your local communities and putting action to it. But I want to explain, you know, if you read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, you have to understand your enemy. You have to know the enemy. If you don't know how this thing operates, you can't win the battle. So I want to draw a picture for you. In 1945, right after the Second World War, a sexual manifesto was written. We, the United States, held a scientist, the greatest scientist of the decade in the 40s and 50s. We just about gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. Two of our presidents said he's the greatest American alive. His name was Alfred Kinsey. Kinsey wrote the Sexual Manifesto for the youth, for the sexualization of the world's youth. Everything we know about sex today, everywhere you are, was written by Kinsey, an American, okay? He made Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner was a virgin first year in college. He went to Hugh, he said, you're my prodigy, we're gonna bring this thing in called Playboy. Everything we do today was written by Kinsey. So here's what happened 5.5 years ago, and we tracked this globally, because I like to fight the enemy on their territory. I don't believe they need to come into my house. I don't wait until they come here. So this is what happened. And this is fact, and if this ruffles your feathers, then so be it. The World Health Organization took Kinsey's document and wrote a sexual manifesto of today for the world's children. A proposition to this is how to treat children with sex for the world. They brought in a couple friends. They brought in UNESCO, which is an arm of the United Nations. They brought in SICUS, which is the overarching governing body in the United States for all curriculum. And then they brought in one more friend to finalize this curriculum, the International Planned Parenthood Foundation. Okay? Those 5 entities wrote the new sexual manifesto based on Kinsey's work. Now, Kinsey was an adult, 42 at the time, that experimented orgasm on 6-week-old boys, 10-year-old boys, 15-year-old boys. And he classified rejection of sexual orgasm as ecstasy. So when the baby cried, he said that's a form of ecstasy. Every pedophile today, Kinsey is their hero. He's their champion. Do you know that we've not had a single mass murder in American history? Not one. Whether name the names, whether it's Bundy or whoever, that was not a porn addict. They're all porn addicts. They're all pedophiles. And I want to explain to you how this works. So they write this manifesto. They always take it to Africa first. We saw it. They went to Kenya. They tested this curriculum that they wrote in Kenya. They were successful. They completely compromised children. They took it to Europe, and then they literally looked for one suitor. They looked for one suitor in the United States. This is fact. That said, I'll be the first to employ and bring in that manifesto as a curriculum into the United States. And Gavin Newsom raised his hand. It's a fact. Gavin Newsom signed the comprehensive sex ed curriculum into law by executive order without the State Board of Education of California getting a vote. We're currently helping the State Board of Education in California fight against Newsom because they did not get to vote. Today in California, comprehensive sex ed is the law. If your child is in a public school, that child's taught comprehensive sex ed. From what age, Jaco? From kindergarten.
Yep.
I have every curriculum in my study in my house. What they teach in kindergarten today, in the classroom, in the public classroom, they teach masturbation.
Yep.
This is fact. The second Newsom signed that document, Kinsey in Washington said, I'm next, signed executive order. Kinsey is a coward. Because Kinsey signed the document at 1:20 a.m. March 20th in the middle of COVID when not a single parent could show up in the state of Washington to protest it and sign it into executive order. And the comprehensive sex ed curriculum went across the United States like a wildfire. 27 states before we could blink, we started fighting it. No entity in the world has ever won a case against comprehensive sex ed anywhere. Europe, Africa, anywhere. Until we did a show, and I'm not tooting our horn, we did a show, and a very dear friend, Glenn Beck, said, I'll stand with you in this. Absolutely. Texas voted on it. It was an 11-4 yes vote. A preliminary 11-4 yes vote. We had 72 hours to protest. Glenn said, come on the show. 6.5 million Texans responded, and it swung to a 9-5 no vote. And Texas was the first state in the world to win against comprehensive sex ed. Okay? That's a fact. But we're a free country. Austin ISD said, no. We're going to opt it in. So today, if your child is in Austin, you're taught comprehensive sex ed. So when Johnny moves from Austin to Dallas, and Johnny walks into your kid's classroom, Johnny's going to have a conversation with your 9-year-old about anal sex, about consent. But then Newsom said this is not enough, so he signed State Bill 145. State Bill 145 creates a 10-year age gap. So when a 24-year-old rapes a 15-year-old, rapes, which she's a victim, 100%, we don't need force for a coercion, it's up to a federal judge to decide whether it was consensual or not. So forget about, statutory rape clause, forget about, 17 and under is a victim in the state of California. You have lawmakers writing law in direct contrast to federal statute, allowing people to rape and hurt and abuse children. And why is it important to teach a 5-year-old, by the way, pre-K, about sex? Because here's one of our cases at the moment, and I'll close. Okay? We got a boy, he's 12. He's a porn addict, about 2 hours a week. Here's what happened to him. He went into a classroom, and his teacher asked him this question, because it's on page 12, and it's perfectly normal, which is part of the curriculum. And page 12 asks, does anal sex hurt? This is in the classroom.
Wow.
He had never heard of the word anal sex. Take out your phone if you're brave enough, go to YouTube and type in the word anal sex and see what comes up. The most grotesque, free sex, rape, gang rape on YouTube. So he went home as an inquisitive 10-year-old boy and he types in anal sex. And today he's a porn addict. Today he's been exploited. This is happening in the US classroom. But here's the bait Newsom threw out. He said, hey, if you're a public school, we'll pay you $3,000 a child if you opt the program in. So the private schools are opting in. This is real, guys. We're dealing with 30 states. We have 13 states at the moment that's trying to lower the age of consent to 14. You're dealing with individuals that want to normalize the abuse of children. And these individuals fight like crazy. But behind the curtains, this evil, remember, Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's not here to play games. This is as real as it gets. And now throw COVID on top of it, and the kids are home, and it's online, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so that's globally how this thing happens, okay? It's orchestrated.
Scary stuff.